Eldrigu Namaskara. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Department of Electronics, Information Technology and Biotechnology, Government of Karnataka, and Software Technology Parks of India, STPI Bengaluru, I am Shankar Prakash, extending a very, very warm welcome to Day 3. Tamagellarigu swagata, suswagata. Let's hear a round of applause free and get the energy back amidst this AC. Okay. All our esteemed panelists are ready. As we are all aware, this is a session on women in leadership, breaking the glass ceiling to Apara, unbound possibilities. First of all, I would like to call upon the moderator, Chandra R. Srikanth, Deputy Executive Editor, moneycontrol.com. Kindly come over, ma'am. The panelists consist of Sandhya Devanathan, Vice President and Head, Meta India. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you must keep putting your hands together until all the panelists come over. I would now like to call upon Priya Mohan, Investor, General Catalyst, and finally, Ishpita Dasgupta, the Managing Director of HP India Market. I'm pretty sure this will be an absorbing and a great session with women power in full force. Okay. Without much ado, I would straight away hand over the session to our moderator, Chandra Srikanth. It's all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. All of you had your breakfast, coffee, etc. Can we have a huge round of applause? Because it's very rare to get Ipsita, Priya, and Sandhya together on stage. And as you can see from their profiles, they head some of the biggest companies in India. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the questions. And we're going to be talking about women in leadership, breaking the glass ceiling to unbound possibilities. And these are three women who've broken the glass ceiling and how. So a huge round of applause again for the panelists. Great. Thank you so much, Sandhya, Priya, and Ipsita. A lot of people are trickling in this morning. And this is a great venue for any event, Bangalore Palace. But Sandhya, let me begin with you. You know, we often talk about breaking the glass ceiling, but what people don't talk about are the hidden sticky floors that can trip you up in the process. It could be, you know, gender bias in the workplace, societal guilt, self-doubt. Can you share a story about a time when you faced these things and how you sort of overcame that and how you fought them?
Chandra, firstly, thank you for having me here, and it's great to be at the Bangalore Tech Summit. I was just amazed by the crowds walking in, and I'm looking forward to see the exhibitions as well later. To your question, I think, look, I've worked almost for like 24 years, and there have been many, many moments where definitely the sticky floor, in fact, the sinking floor. But I'll talk specifically about a few instances. One, I think, you know, people talk about the pay gap between men and women, and I think there were various instances where I actually found out that I was earning 80 cents to the dollar for what a man doing a similar job as me was actually making. And I did that in banking because I used to sign off actually on credit card limits, and I was running retail banking at a company, and then I found that my male counterparts, because I would have to approve their credit limits, were actually making, you know, a dollar, and I was making 80 cents for exactly the similar role. So I actually had to go and have hard conversations. But what I then realized is that if it was to me, then it would also be, probably it would be systemic. So we actually undertook reviews because I was the women at lead at that time. And what we found was that because your entry points are different, because you negotiate less, it sort of builds up over time. So I think I would say it's not a sticky flow, but just a data point. I always lead with the data in terms of, is that telling you something? And then good companies take corrective action. It's not the question of whether they exist or not exist, but if you find it, what do you do with it? And I've been blessed to work in companies that always sort of walk the extra mile when it comes to, you know, making sure there isn't that kind of disparity. And if we see it, we address it.
That's quite ironic, right? She had to sign off on credit card limits, and then she realized there's a pay gap. But, you know, I'm glad they put systems in place to address that. But Priya, building on that, have you experienced moments when you felt unsupported or misunderstood? How did you navigate that?
So again, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here. So I'm going to take a very contrarian view on this, right? I think all three of us, we have 20 plus years of career, right? And I am married. I have a 16-year-old. My life, I would give a lot of credit to a lot of people who've supported me. Like my husband's a stay-at-home dad, by the way, and it's a choice he made. And the reason I bring this up is there's not one, two, I can give you 100 examples where, this job is lonely, being a leader is lonely, and top of that, to be a woman, to manage multiple things. I still do groceries at home. I still manage my help at home. But I've learned over the years, the philosophy of your life is more important than anything. And the philosophy I practice is the fact that you have to be extremely, focused on what you want to prioritize, be very clear on the trade-off, and stop going back and constantly worrying about it, because you will never get peace of mind. What I want to solve for is hyper-learning. I want to solve for being in the table. And once you have that philosophy, I genuinely think that you won't take a 3-year view, you take a 10-year view. And that's personally helped me a lot.
Right. Ipsita, coming to you, but this confidence, the conviction that Priya spoke about, right? Does it also have to do with conditioning, your childhood, what your parents have taught you? Because I remember this famous anecdote of Indra Nui's, right? She came home after receiving a big promotion, and her mom told her that, go and buy milk because we are out of milk. So how does that sort of affect how you are as a business leader? Because many women also battle guilt day in and day out. So how do you navigate that?
Absolutely. And I think everything that both Sandhya and Priya said are true. And the interesting thing is that the opposite is also true. There's no debate that for people like us who are sitting on stage, we have a lot of support. And we have ecosystems that conspire to make us successful. Generally, if you look at the overall population, that is not the case. I mean, just to put it very starkly, the universe conspires to make men successful. The universe does not conspire to make women successful. And we see it in everything that shows up. If you look at our numbers, we have the lowest women participation in the workforce in the entire world. There's only Afghanistan, I think, that's below us. Both Bangladesh and Pakistan are above us. Secondly, Indian women happen to have the highest number of stakeholders involved in their lives. So this is true for all of us. We have in-laws, we have parents, we have aunts, we have uncles. We have neighbors who have a point of view on what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. The number of times I walk into my building and I'll be standing next to a woman who I have a lot of admiration for because of whatever she does, who will turn to me and say, "We were just talking about you last night. Are you traveling all the time? Are the children okay?" And I think these things impact us, right? We're all human. So in my mind, and I completely see where Indra Nui is coming from, and I've sort of seen her talk about sort of the challenges, and she's dead on. I do agree with Priya that at some level you have to figure out your own view on how you're going to approach things. For me, my mom sort of gave me that direction to say, look, anything you do, there's a group of people that aren't going to like it. When I stepped away, my parents live in Singapore, when I stepped away to come look after my grandchildren so I could unlock my daughter, people said, she's not looking after her husband. When I did, when I started to work as a lawyer to provide for my family when my father passed away and I was in my late teens, early 20s, people said, oh, she's stepping out of the house. So the reality is that as women, we get a lot more criticism, we get a lot more commentary. I think a philosophy is important to have, but I also think the recognition that the important thing for us to do is to show up every day. Not to be perfect every day, not to meet our goals every day, right, but to show up every day. And all of us show up as each of the things we are, right? We show up as a family member, we show up as a parent, we show up as a professional, we show up as a leader. And I think that's the piece that is really important, and that allows for representation. My worry is when women walk out of the workforce.
Yeah.
My worry is when women feel it's a choice between being a mother or worse, a wife, and being in the workforce, right? So what I would say the most important thing to do is not really try to figure out the balance, that's never going to happen, but to just show up every day in each of these roles.
Right. Great insight. Show up every day despite everything and have that inner conviction. But Sandhya, have things changed, improved? Because, I remember in 2015, 2016, it was still very new to talk about work from home and flexible working. I mean, the MNCs led the charge, but it was still not normalized for Indian companies. Do you think that has changed post-pandemic? Is it easier to be a woman and a working professional and a mother and a wife and a daughter today compared to, say, 5 years ago? Because, work from home is kind of normalized all over the world.
Look, I'm aware that the answer that I'm going to give is probably, from my perspective, a privileged response because it comes from tech, right? But this is the industry I know well. And I think definitely, and our company has pioneered flexible work. So we, even now with lots of return to office mandates, we're still 3 days in office, 2 days, you can work from home. So if you ask me, when I started my career was in 2000. I was in a bank at that time. I was at Citi. And I remember, the challenges I had when I had a newborn baby in New York. You had to juggle nanny, going to work and, manage it all. And I was doing a long distance project with Singapore, which meant I'd wake up at 3 in the morning. It was really difficult. So I go back to Ipsita's points. You show up every day. And I keep telling people who are younger in their journey or, have caregiving responsibilities, could also be older parents. Yeah, like just stay in the game. Don't drop out because, it'll seem very hard for a bit. But if you get through that and you get the right kind of support or you try and make it work, then you're sort of not giving up on your longer term career. To your question on whether it's gotten easier, look, again, like I said, I speak from the view of what I'm seeing, in my industry, and definitely like if you're in hardware and you're in manufacturing, you probably have to show up at the plant, like you need to physically be there. But whereas in ours, which is the services sector, you can do your work, remotely and from anywhere, and that is something as a company we've encouraged, and I think as more and more companies sort of embrace that, and I'm seeing that change also in the startups I work with and the other companies that I work with in India, where there's a little more flexibility in, when you show up and what you do. The second thing I would say, it's not just about, the return to office or, can you work remotely mandates. It's other things. Like, for example, we have both paternal and maternal leave. So what it does, it also normalizes, having a child not just as something that a woman does, and yes, she bears the child, but it's the family that brings parental responsibilities, are both the father and the mother, if that's your unit, right? So I do think those kinds of policies go a long way in making it easier for women to stay in the workforce, to have fulfilling careers.
Right. Priya, what I notice, and you're in the VC industry, you may have experienced this, is that, the work life and the personal life kind of merges too easily for the men, right? They catch up in office, then they catch up for a late night drink and, they crack deals on the golf course over, a pack of cigarettes. But women are very conscious about drawing the line, which is fair, right? Why should you hang out with someone you met at work, But has that sort of cost you deals? Because, a male counterpart at another VC fund went out with this guy. He was hanging out at the pub till 2 a.m. But you had to come back home at 10 p.m. because, you have a 16-year-old at home.
I'm just gathering my thoughts how to answer this. Look, I think it comes back to the first point I made, which is I've really worked hard on a philosophy that works for me. I'm not going to make it prescriptive, but I can share it as an experience. And the philosophy is two things. Beyond the part what Ipsita said, show up. The worst days, I've been a founder. I became a founder. I've gone through lows and lows, very lonely journey. And then now I'm a VC. In both cases, showing up is important. The second most thing, what's worked for me, is I'm very comfortable being authentic. Right? I think that's very important to be extremely comfortable about the person who you are and be aware of how you show up as a presence in meetings with people. So the point you're making is people who've worked with me, they understand what I value, what I respect, just as I understand what they value and respect. So I believe in all these years, as I earn my right to stay in the table, I've never encountered, of course, earlier, you have to overcompensate. And I would say not just for women, men also, more so for women, you're right. You overcompensate before you earn the right to,
Yeah.
get into the table. But as you grow up, I think the one thing is I'm very comfortable saying, these are my priorities. I work very long hours, as I'm sure the women here as well. But I'm very okay saying no. But you have to earn the right to say no. There are many years where I overcompensated, I've worked extra, but when I earn the right to say no, I'm very comfortable to say, this is the time I go back. This is the time I'm okay to let go of this. But I'm also very comfortable doing, sometimes very often in my office, I go out, have a drink with my colleagues while I have the younger people who say, no, Priya, we're not coming, I'm going to go work out tomorrow, right? So all I'm saying is it's very important to have a philosophy for yourself, understand and work really hard on your self-awareness. That's something that I would overemphasize with everybody here. And then be comfortable in your skin and understand the trade-offs. What are you willing to gain? What are you willing to lose? Because every value, like with companies, when you have a core value, core brand, you have to pay a price for it, right? But being consistent, being authentic is very important.
Right. Ipsita, in your journey to, leading HP across multiple markets, have you seen people being resistant to authority? How did you overcome that? Because there is an expectation that female leaders should have more empathy. And if they don't, that's misconstrued. Sometimes confidence is seen as arrogance. How did you sort of navigate those challenges?
Honestly, I don't know because I've never been a man, so I don't know how I would have been treated if I were. So it's hard to say. I'd say, before I say it, I want to say something in addition to what Priya was just talking about. I think this idea of self-awareness is really important because until you know yourself, I feel like every day of my life is a constant negotiation.
Yeah.
I have two 10-year-old daughters. Every year, I'm trying to figure out what is their perspective on what I do and what is the conversation we need to have. So I just want to give one small example, and I think it'll be very real to a lot of people in the audience. My husband gets as much pressure as I do, by the way, to get home for something. So I think that's also changing from a male point of view, which is when he says he has a drinks after work or he has to take a customer out to dinner, my kids are not happy. Because they expect a certain, in fact, more flexibility from him because he travels less in his work and I travel a lot. But still, I'll give you this example of a conversation I had with one of my 10-year-olds a year ago. She said something like, I just don't think it's fair that dad does the same, dad does a lot of stuff for us where the other moms do everything for our friends. And my response was because I knew myself. I wasn't expecting that question. What I said to both of them is I said, you have a lot of boys in your class. They're still at an age they don't like boys. I said, choose a boy in your class. And now tell me that boy, you are going to take care of his house. You are going to take care of his life. You are going to clean up his desk. You are going to help him get his homework done, right? You're not going to focus on yourself. You're going to focus on that boy. And they were like, oh, Mom, why would I do that? That's awful. Ew. And I said, correct. So when you say to me, this is what all the other mothers are doing, you are telling me to choose to put dad first, right? And not to allow us both to take what we have been given in our capabilities, in our resources, and make the most of it. And I saw the transformation, and all I did was have the conversation I've had with myself many times, right? So I think what's key in this is the idea of even as you know yourself and as people around you sort of interact with you, you know more. So now I'm going to answer the question you asked. I walk into rooms where I'm the only woman, but I don't realize I'm the only woman because I'm not looking at myself, right? So when if I walk into a room where half the people are women, based on the industries I've been in, it'll be a shocking room to me. However, what I do, and I have done over time, because I've recognized that there is this difference in the way women are perceived and men are perceived, and I think it's especially true in our country. I've lived and worked in China. I grew up in the States. There's a difference here in how much is expected of us, how nurturing we're supposed to be, etc. And what I've done is I've played with my style. And I keep saying this to women as they become new managers and leaders. Not just women, I say to everyone, play with your style. Go in and do something. Let HR come and talk to you and say, that was too tough. Or watch someone miss their numbers and realize that was too soft. Because how do you emerge with what your philosophy is or who you are, or understand how people are going to treat you unless you play with your style, right? So I don't know the answer to whether I have experienced something that I wouldn't have if I were a man. I do know the answer that I have developed an equilibrium when I have seen contexts around me and how people respond.
Right.
I have
Can I
one
add to that?
tactical point here.
I think
right?
Priya and Sandhya want to add, so please go ahead.
Yeah. So one thing beyond, one framework that I really use is I work very hard when it's an intense debate, negotiation, and I feel that there's possibility that there's a bias because obviously, often it's not just being a woman, you're also the youngest in the room sometimes when you get fast ahead. What I try and do is constantly make the other person feel even more important, right? So I try and take away the conversation around possible biases to very tactical stuff. I keep paraphrasing what the other person says. Did you mean to say this, right? I feel I'm on this side. Why don't you guide me? How do you get to the middle path? I've realized very tactically, it generally stems from a certain set of perceptions the other person's holding. When you create a very non-threatening environment in the table where you're like, be objective, let's keep the personal biases aside, let's get to the point, keep paraphrasing, keep mirroring, it's really helped. It's a very tactical point, but that's something I've learned over the years to do.
That's a great tip. Sandhya?
No, Ipsita started off by talking about being in rooms where she's the only woman and not being aware of it. I think it took me, I worked in India, then I worked in the Philippines, the US, and in Singapore. It sort of took me my first stint out to realize that that was the tax I was paying. There's a tax you pay, right? Because to be heard, to speak up, if you are a minority, it's not just whether you're a woman, it could be, a different point of view, but like whatever it is, it's a tax that you pay, and the tax sort of keeps adding up, and it just makes things harder and harder. So one of the things that I've done in terms of style is just call out the tax that people are paying, right? When I'm in rooms, when I'm with founders where their team is completely male, and in my role, I have the honor to work with a lot of incredible, people across India and in Southeast Asia and Asia before that. So I do call it out because I think it's important that if you're in a role where you see this, you've paid that tax, it doesn't have to be that everyone else has to pay the same tax. So sort of calling it out is something that I do. The second thing is in terms of style, I think if you're nice, and I'd like to think that I'm fairly collaborative. I have a different style from maybe the men that I work with, but I think what I've learned over a period of time is to make people understand that my niceness is not to be confused with weakness, right? And I think there is, authority that comes with the role, there's decisions that you need to take, and I don't think that should be confused with how you show up and, what your style of working is. So yeah, even as you play around with the style, I think the one thing that I've gotten really comfortable with is being authentic in the way I lead, in the way I show up, and, expecting people to also work with me with that style.
Great insights on style. But Sandhya, the other thing that I wanted to, ask you was, there's this constant debate, right? Can women have it all? Because the career clock is in conflict with the biological clock. What kind of trade-offs did you have to make? And again, has that changed? Because India, again, stands out for the fact that you get 6 months of maternity leave here. There are companies that are now open to giving, a 1 year, 2 year sabbatical, unpaid leave, and then you come back. So has that improved? Have you ever faced that conflict?
Look, I had my baby in New York, and he's now 16, and I had 3 months. And I remember the week that I got back, I was on a plane to Warsaw on work, and sitting in the town square and crying because I was missing my child so much. So after that, I decided I'm not going to travel. I would take calls, but I had an employer that was understanding enough to then say, okay, maybe not really understanding. I'd wake up at 3 and do calls with Singapore all night and things like that, right? But it was definitely, I think, at those times, those trade-offs looked very, very daunting. And we were chatting. I think there were sort of, when I moved to Singapore, there were, my son was 2, and I took on a big role. I was one of the youngest managing directors at Stanchart at that time. And one of the conditions almost over lunch given to me was, I hope you're not planning to have another kid, right? When I took on the role. So it was very sort of low-key, and for various reasons, I have only one son. But I think that was the environment in banking at that point. But I do think that's not the environment today. I think there are more, hopefully, many more conversations that are happening about, equally raising a family, this is a very personal choice, right? Your biological, it's also a family choice that you make on how many kids you want to have, whether you want to have kids at all. So I'm hoping in India now, definitely, at least in the sectors that I work in, I'm seeing more of those conversations. But definitely, the biological clock will be in conflict with, with your career clock, not just when you're having kids, but, when you're entering your 50s and you have different challenges around when you're in the peak of your career and you're also dealing with menopause and things like that. I think there are 1 billion women globally that are going to be in menopause over the next decade or something. So those are conversations, that don't get had, and I think those are in conflict, but you just have to find a way to sort of normalize it, talk about it, and work with your lens of what is success for you. So that's the other thing. I think now I'm in 24th year of my career, I would think one of the things that I've gotten better at is what works for me, what doesn't work for me, what do I want. So this India role was a very, very, thoughtful decision that I took with my family. My son and my husband live in Singapore. This is the first time we've been apart as a family. But this was an opportunity to be part of an incredible story in my country. I wanted to come back. This was a great role, I think, in terms of the opportunity it provides, the impact we can have in the nation. And for me, it was, it was something I wanted to do, but I wanted my family to be supportive of it. So I wouldn't have taken that decision if we hadn't done it together. So we made a choice as a family that my son, who's 16, would continue to study there. My husband would support us, in staying in Singapore with them. And, I live here, they live there. So, you make those choices.
Yeah.
So I think it ultimately comes back down to what works for you, what works for your family unit if you have one, and what are the trade-offs you're willing to make.
Right.
Is it the same question or you're changing the question?
I had a different question, but if you want to add on to what she said, you're free.
Actually, I'm going to be point blank. I don't think anybody can have it all. Okay? Simply because if you take a pie chart, time, energy, right? It's a choice you make where you allocate your time, where you allocate your energy. It's just impossible. It's a definitive thing. So this concept of I've never understood the question, have it all, you cannot have it all. Because it means like you don't have multiple choices in this. If you're choosing to take away 1 year to have a child, that 1 year is gone. It's not a multiple choice, right? Like it's that. But the question is, I'll tell you what I've struggled with, and I'm going to be very vulnerable here. There are many days when I was younger and climbing up to say that I would be very jealous or I would be very, inspired by women who are there to always visualize that I want to be there, right? But at the same time, I would be the same person who's very upset that I would not be able to pick up my child, okay? Today, it's the reverse. We're so busy. I have not seen my kid. We live in the same house. Yesterday, I came at 10:30, then I got into a call. By the time I went, I just went to tuck her in. And then, we're there, but I never see her, except for the weekends. And now I think and visualize, why didn't I keep my life simple, right? Like, why didn't I just, read a book or just... What I realized is we kill ourselves with our own personal guilt. We kill ourselves to constantly thinking about our choices, which is natural. But at some point, you'll have to be comfortable with where the universe led you, the choices you made, and where you have come. And the biggest answer I've learned over the years of thinking through this is A, it starts with being kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Understanding that, you know, you're all seeking, you have to be kind to yourself. And there's a whole new future ahead. And work on your philosophy, work on your self-awareness, and be comfortable in what you've chosen to do. Because otherwise, and I would say the other way also, it is true that a lot of, and we are privileged. It's very important to emphasize the three of us here are extremely privileged. When I see the help in my home, she's taking a loan from me and left her daughter, who's like 5 kilometers away, who's as old as my child, with her mother, to come and work with me every day. And I still know, unfortunately I have to call it out, it's a lot of women who think twice about paying them that little extra. Be kind to yourself. When you're kind to yourself, you will be kind to others and really give back.
Yeah. Ipsita, I want to ask you about this. You know, when you look at the statistics, right, at least the IT services, software industry is very good when it comes to having women at the entry level. It's almost 50%. But you see that severe drop-off happening when they, you know, reach, I don't know, their early 30s. And this is a point you brought up in the beginning in terms of India having a very low female labor force participation rate, just, I think, above Pakistan and Bangladesh. Below Pakistan and Bangladesh. So, you know...
Give them the credit.
So how do you think that can change? I mean, what should we be doing? Why is that still persistent?
And I don't think it's just the IT industry. I think it's every industry. Look, I think there's multiple reasons for it. I think on one end, contexts need to be much better in professional environments to allow women to rise. And I'll give you an example. First of all, there were studies done, I'll cite 2 studies that were done many years ago. In fact, I remember speaking about them, I don't know, at Women in the World, which was in 2016, so now 8 years ago. One was man and woman earning the same amount of money for a household. Woman does 6 times the amount of childcare and 3 times the amount of housework. Okay? If you let that land, just understand the pressure on that human being to then try to rise up the corporate ladder.
We particularly saw this during the pandemic, right? Many women quit the workforce then.
Yeah.
And it was counterintuitive because you would have thought that everyone is at home, but they actually started
Because
doubling
at
down and
home,
tripling
10
down.
people are calling you and saying, can you get me a cup of tea? Can you get me a glass of water? Can you help me get from this room to the other room? You know, and nobody is calling the man, right?
Amazon OTP now.
Yeah.
Send me the Amazon OTP.
There you go. The second statistic sort of finding I'll give you is studies were done that showed that no amount of policies or programs actually make a difference in a woman's career trajectory as much as a network of 8 or 9 people that make her successful.
That's a great point.
And it's not just women. Every person who becomes a leader does not become a leader on their own. It's because somebody spots them and gives them the leadership opportunity. Women happen to talk about it more. We tend to be aware of who's helped us along the way. I've gotten up to speak after many men who talk about what they've done, I've done. And I've gotten up after many women and said the same thing the women say. This person helped me get here, that person helped me get there, that person. So I think we need to move from, you know, Sandhya gave the example of getting on a flight. My kids, my twins were born just a couple of weeks premature. I was in the NICU closing a deal because I was the chief commercial officer of GE India and China. I couldn't afford not to close that deal. I was also afraid to leave them in the NICU because I didn't want somebody to mix up a medicine or something else for another child. So I was standing in the NICU doing the calls. What does that mean? Whatever the policy was. For me, I had 6 weeks of maternity leave. The policy made no difference because I had decided I wanted to make impact. I also was the most protective person with my children. And so the network we have and we give people is what matters the most. And I always tell women, avoid mentors. You don't need another person to give you advice. Find advocates. Advocates are people who say, you're looking for someone to do this really big role? You know, I met Sandhya, and I know Sandhya, and she's really good. I think you should meet her. It's somebody who takes action on your behalf. Too often, we get a lot of advice, and I'm not just talking about women. So I'm big on avoiding mentors and going for advocates, because women especially need advocates. And then I want to speak to one thing that I think both of them touched upon a little bit differently. As the gender we are and the amount of help we need, because we are the primary caregivers, because we are the ones who, by social conditioning or by biology, I'm not sure, but worry the most about what's happening to everyone in our families, we need to be the nicer gender. I need to have 4 friends that are doctors and 3 friends that are neighbors that I can call anytime in an emergency who will go and grab my kids or check what's going on. And they're not going to do that if they don't like me. And so we, unfortunately or fortunately, need to be the nicer gender. We need to be liked more to be able to do everything that we have to do. So I think this idea of rising through the ranks, I think we both need to create the home environment, but we need to recognize networks is what's going to drive that for women. And then the last thing I want to say is I get really frustrated when women drop out. So one of the things I say to women a lot is, especially in a country like India, if you've taken an engineering or a medical seat, you know, or any other opportunity, don't drop out of the workforce. I have had women I have been huge advocates for come into my office and say, Ipsita, I just wanted to let you know I'm quitting. Why are you quitting? I'm getting married. Okay, why are you quitting? I want to focus on my marriage. Is your husband quitting? Are you guys going to be spending all day like staring at each other? No. Okay, now I at least still understand the logic when having a child. What is the reason when you're getting married? It's the second reason women leave the workforce, because they're getting married. Right? So it's on us as well, right? We have to decide we want to take on what it takes, and we need to think about things like, I'm going to focus on my marriage.
I think we're running out of time, so last 2 minutes.
I want to add one thing, what she said about mentor versus advocate, and this is an observation I've made about women. I don't know if they agree. I think the other thing is, very often when younger people come to me, I look for clarity of thought. I don't see the confidence very often to come and ask, what's the worst thing that people are going to say? It's a no. What they do is they come and they sit, but that confidence to ask, can you help me in this, or be clear of this is what I want of you, I think that's another thing we have to get better at. Because for people to be an advocate, they need to know you're out there, you're willing to take it on. Very often you come there and you're like all over the place, it's hard.
I think we have 2 minutes left. I just want to sort of react to what Ipsita said. If you look at India now and, you know, the march that we're having, the incredible run we're having as an economy that's going to be $7-8 trillion in the not too distant future, you know, one of the things that worries me is that women will get left behind in actually contributing to that. We can get there faster if women are also equal participants in, you know, getting us there. And India is one of the few countries globally where there's 2 places where women drop off, when they get married and when they have kids. Most other places, you know, women drop off the workforce when they have kids. So I think there's clearly something there, you know, in terms of a conversation, cultural sort of, changes that need to happen. But I'm also sort of buoyed by what I do see on our platform, right? Which is when we had the pandemic, yes, many women took on the double burden of, or triple burden of managing home, you know, family that was staying with them, kids and their work. But I think also what we saw on our platform was 50% of, you know, pages that were set up, were women-owned on Instagram, businesses, right? So we saw a big jump in women-owned businesses on our platforms, both on Facebook and Instagram during that period. And if you think about that 60 million SMBs in the country, going from contributing 30% to GDP to 40%. Having options like this, which is platforms like ours that democratize the ability to start a business, reach an audience, all of that, I'm hoping will help with that larger conversation of having women engaged in the workforce. Still doesn't solve your engineer and medical student problem, but helps with the larger participation in the workforce. We're seeing the same thing on the creator economy as well,
Right.
which is a lot more women participating, sharing their thoughts, expressions on platforms like ours. So I think it's a tale of there's the corporate setup, but there's also the emerging gig economy and the emerging sort of small businesses. Like that momentum, I'm hoping women will, end up playing an equal,
More
if
people
not,
will participate.
Yeah, so it'd be great, and that's something as a company that we're quite invested in as well. So I think about that a lot. The second thing I'd say is just in tech, normalizing parenting, like maternity, paternity leaves, normalizing time that you need to take off for caregiving. Like the companies need to step in to help, because not everybody is going to have, everything will not go swimmingly well in life, right? There will be times you need to step back, there'll be times that you lean in, and organizations sort of recognizing that and keeping, women going in the workforce. It's not just enough to hire. You want to find them, you want to grow them, and you want to keep them in your company. So I think if you did that, the company would stand to benefit. So, and I am seeing that change as well.
Great. On that note, this was a fabulous discussion, Ipsita, Priya, and Sandhya. Show up every day, keep at it, don't drop out. And, you've kind of really seen how all of them battled the odds. And Priya, though you said, it's not possible to have it all, in some way, all of you made trade-offs to ensure that, you have it all. A family.
As long as you define your all. That's
Correct.
what I'm trying to tell you.
Right.
The problem is you're always looking at somebody else's all, right? I am always envious of that homemaker who gets so much time with her child, and she's going to be envious of me because I'm this big career girl. I think you should just be comfortable to define what's your all.
Define your all. Great, great insight. Thank you very much. And I hope we see many more Ipsitas, Priyas, and Sandhyas rising to the top of organizations in India. Thank you all very much. A huge round of applause for them.
Well, indeed, it was a highly thought-provoking session, and some of the important things, I don't mind, with their permission, I would like to repeat, that niceness should not be taken as weakness. What great words to hear. And philosophy of life, mentors, advocates. Let's hear it for them, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a clear lesson of life. Jeevanandre Yenu, ano paata namgellu siktu. Thank you very much for that. On this note, I would request Dr. Ekrup Kaur to kindly come over and give a mementos to all of them. Secretary to Government, Department of Electronics, IT, BT, and S&T Government of Karnataka. And also request Madam Ruchi Bindal to join her. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to give a round of applause. I think it was a great start for the third day deliberations here at Bengaluru Tech Summit. Thank you very much. I would request all of you to kindly be in your seats, because in the next 2 to 3 minutes we'll set the stage, and the next session on digital public infrastructure of India going global will unfold. So all of you kindly be in your seats. So we'd like to thank the moderator Chandra Shrikant, the panelists Sandhya Devanathan, Priya Mohan, and Ipsita Dasgupta for that wonderful panel discussion. And we'd also like to thank Dr. Ekrup Kaur and Ruchi Bindal. Thank you very much, and kindly be patient for the next 3 to 4 minutes. Thank you.